All right, YouTube, it's Clear Vision Wednesday time. I am your host, Claudia Mühlenweg, known as the Holistic Vision Coach. Before we do anything, make sure that you please subscribe to this channel. That helps me grow this channel, give valuable information every single Wednesday coming on and talking about all things vision improvement, eyesight improvement, how you can see better naturally. And today I have a very special guest on. He was here before. And before I bring him on stage, so he's a fellow vision educator, helping other people improve their eyesight naturally. And he is very, very interested in this topic that we have today, which is color vision. So welcome, Nathan. Let me bring you on back to the show. Yes.
Hello.
Hi. So color vision is tell us why. Obviously, you are interested in all things vision because you do what I do. You help people improve their eyesight and their vision naturally. But tell everybody a little bit why color vision is so interesting to you or why you're so passionate about it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Claudia. It's really good to be back. And yeah, kind of like we were chatting about just a moment ago, this is almost kind of like our part two on the conversation because the last time I was on Clear Vision Wednesday, we were also talking about the connection of color and vision therapy, color therapy. So I'm excited to kind of go in a slightly different direction with it today, but still, give some insights on color vision and on color blindness, which is actually something that I experience. Um, and it's, I guess, a little ironic that, a vision teacher has red-green color blindness, but it's just an example of something that can also be worked with through natural vision improvement. It was not my main focus. I was much more interested in reversing my myopia and my astigmatism, my floaters, those kinds of things, because they were really impacting my day-to-day life and my functionality in the world. Whether I have color blindness or full color vision didn't really affect my day-to-day life quite as much. It was almost more of an afterthought, but it's become very important to me because my perception and experience of color really means a lot to the my quality of life, my enjoyment of life. Now that my vision has cleared and I don't need glasses to see in the distance, that was sort of the next step. Is like, oh, I wonder if there's anything I can do to sort of increase the color of the world that I see. So I have seen some slight changes in that. So I'm sure we can talk about that a little bit
Yeah.
today and some practical things that I've played and learned. But a lot of my passion for color and color therapy and light therapy got sort of increased, started with the Bates method, obviously, with the sunning and the light therapy in the natural sense. But then it really took another form when I started looking more into groups like the International Light Association and started to not only go into these vision conferences where you and I have got to hang out in person and meet, but also these light and color conferences, which I just was involved in one in Italy last month. And yeah, this is really diving much more specifically into the whole world of color therapists and people who that's kind of their main focus. And then I'm like the natural vision guy, in that world. So yeah, I'm sure I'll be able to share a couple things from kind of that side of it as well today.
Yes, and I have a lot of questions. First of all, as I was researching this topic a little bit, I realized how many people don't know they're colorblind. So tell us a little bit about like what are the statistics, how many people are colorblind, and how did you find out that you had some color blindness? And then also I would love for you to dive into like there's a spectrum, right? There's between color deficiencies, you touched on red, green. Obviously we have things that we use like something called an Ishihara test where, those you've seen these things where you have to find numbers in different colors. How did you find out, first of all, that you had color deficiencies, I think, or red-green color blindness?
Yeah, because it is more prevalent in men. I think it's 1 in 12 women are affected by it compared to, no, 1 in 12 men are affected to it compared to 1 in 200 women. Um, and I first found out about it when I was pretty young, actually. I had an alarm clock in my bedroom, and I would have friends over to play, and we'd be playing video games or hanging out in my room. And I I guess one day I just mentioned that to me the clock looked orange, and all my friends were like, "What are you talking about? That's green."
Oh, really? That's
And
how you
and
found
so it
out.
Yeah, it really only kind of manifested in more of those like neon, like digital displays. To me, at least, more so than like actual 3D objects, tangible things. So that was more, I guess my eyes were more like susceptible to those like displays on clocks and TVs and screens and stuff. Whereas my experience like out in nature, for example, like I can see green and I can see red in nature, but these more kind of artificial situations, it wasn't coming through the same. Um, but then it got a little more officially, looked at when I also started looking at the Ishihara tests,
Yeah.
and I think it might have been at an eye doctor because, like you said, normally this isn't a part of a normal eye
Who usually
exam. But
test
I think
this?
in the
Yeah.
waiting room, I think they had some of these like sitting around that you could just look at while you're waiting for your exam. And yeah, I just wasn't able to really see any of the numbers. And so that kind of affirmed what I had suspected from the alarm clock experience.
Yeah, it's interesting because when my kids were little and went to the the pediatrician, they had the Snellen chart on the wall. You stand, they always check the distance vision. They never really check near vision and they never check color vision. So it's interesting to me that so many people don't realize this. And when you're not colorblind like me, you don't you assume that everybody sees the world like you, and I wonder how I never played video games, but when you play video games or even driving, right? Maybe did you just learn that, the red is on the top of the traffic light and the green is at the bottom? Like, how did you know, what light was, like, was it red or green? Like, how did you know? Those things, right?
Well, well, that's the thing. Like I can see red lights, I can see green lights. They look totally different to me. It was almost like only certain types of reds and greens.
Uh-huh.
But it
Okay.
also, like you hinted at before, with the wide variety of flavors of color blindness, because there's like the congenital red green that you're just born with, and all of these things a lot of times have a lot to do with the cone cells in the retina, because we've got the photoreceptors, the rods and the cones, and all the cones being like packed into the central area, the macula, and even more so in the fovea centralis. So typically we've got three types of cones, the red and the green and the blue cones. So that's referring to the type of wavelength of light that they're most receptive to. So like the short wavelength, the medium wavelength, the long wavelength. So the short wavelength light is the blue end of the spectrum, and then the longer wavelength is the red end of the spectrum. So that's why sometimes if you're, let's say, missing more of the long wave detectors, then you're more sensitive to the blue end of the spectrum, and you might, the reds and the greens might kind of blend together, or maybe they're just not functioning and it gets registered as like gray or more like almost grayscale or black and white. Which that's how I used to think of, oh, that's what color blindness is you just see in black and white. Which that is a form of color blindness, but that's not the most common kind. It's
That's like
more
the
you still
extreme when you're
have,
completely colorblind, right?
yeah,
When none of the three colors, RGB, right? Like we have on
yeah,
monitors, we have RGB, we have, like you said, blue, green, and red. If none of them functioning, then it is like night vision. Then it's basically like night vision, which is produced by the other cone cells, the other photoreceptors, the rod cells. So, but for most people like you, there is just a deficiency. And like you said, but I'm curious, like just to understand this a little better. You said you noticed it with these extreme colors, but when you were in nature, you could still, let's see, red apples like on a green
Mhm.
tree. You could still see like the red apples look different. And there was like your version of red versus what my version of the red apples would be, right? Like we like it's
True. Yeah, yeah. Because
so I
like for example, you make those colorblind glasses that you can get. I think it's called Enchroma. And there's like some really, actually, like pretty heartwarming videos you can watch online of people who have color blindness, get these glasses, put them on, and look at like colorful balloons and scenes and stuff. And like usually they just start crying because it's kind of that what you're hinting at of like, oh my gosh, like I thought the world looked this way, and I'm seeing it in this way that other people, I guess, see it. And that can be kind of moving to not only, make that realization, but it also kind of speaks to the power of colors. It's like that's why I'm so drawn to colors is because they do have it's like the language of our emotions. You know, it's this interesting way to get into these deeper levels. But yeah, I haven't tried those myself, so who knows if I do put those on, maybe I would enhance my perception of green. Maybe my green is a more dull green than your green. Right? That's how I think about the colors is like it's got a vividness, dial, and maybe if you have like full color vision, it's like all the way up. But if you
Like
have a
saturated
deficiency,
colors, like really
yeah.
intense, right?
Mhm.
I know
Yes.
you did say that you improved your performance on the Ishihara test so that you made some improvements. But I also know that
Mhm.
you're a yoga teacher, just like me, and that you studied the chakras. And when we look at the chakras, with the root chakra being red, and then the crown chakra, the purple color. So there is also this whole spectrum of different colors in so many
Yeah.
aspects of our society. So, but anyway, tell us a little bit. I'm kind of curious, like. First of all, a couple more things about how can we test this. Ishihara is obviously something I can put that in the chat, how it's spelled. You can do it online. There's tons of things online, and then you can get these printed books. But like let's talk mostly about like what can people actually do, or what did you do, and how you help your students that have struggled with color to improve their color
Yeah.
perception.
For me, it really helped me to think about what would nourish my cones because I knew that this was a product of the cone cells in my retinas. And compared to what I was learning about what nourished the rods, which was a lot of movement in the Bates method, has us do lots of these swings and sways and shifting and a lot of movement built into it. So that's really getting the rods activated and nourished. But the cones are different than the rods, and they're nourished by color and by details. So the color is like a food source for the cones, even if they're deficient, right? So I kind of want to take this moment to sort of separate color exposure to color perception because we're receiving light into the eyes and color is making its way into the eye organs. It's the brain and the visual cortex that is perceiving that light into these different colors and shapes and forms. So we can either have a really great color perception going on in the brain, or we could have a really low color perception going on in the brain, but the eye organ is still receiving the same light, the same color,
Right.
whether or not we can perceive it or not. So that's where maybe if someone listening does have color blindness and they're like, well, why would I waste my time looking at these colors and these charts and things if I can't see it or I can't perceive it? But it's just like what we would normally do with the Bates method with an eye chart. If you're nearsighted and you're looking at a chart in the distance and it's blurry, it lacks detail, your first thought might be, well, why am I going to waste my time? I can't read that chart. It's out of focus. But the more time we spend letting that light, bounce off the chart and come into the eyes, we're developing our perception of the chart and we do start to see it better and we get clear flashes and we see more details with the cone cells. We're nourishing the cones, we're activating them with details, even if we can't see the details. Or if you're farsighted, you use the fine print. You take some fine print text and you bring it up close to the eye where it would normally be blurry, fuzzy, out of focus, but you practice it and you still feed it into the cones, and eventually they may actually enhance their ability to perceive the details. So it's very similar to the colors. So, gazing at the colors, either looking at things of certain color or utilizing certain colored light devices to shine into the eyes. The kind of official one would be the like syntonic optometry, the syntonizer device that's, regulated and is safe to look at. Otherwise, there are these, lots and lots of these new home devices, the red infrared light therapy kind of things. So I did a combination of these, color exposures to my eyes where I was just looking at the blue sky and the green leaves and the red apples, like you said, but I was also shining colored light into my eyes. And I was doing a lot of sunning from the Bates method because the sun has the full spectrum, visible and invisible. And I did find that it wasn't extreme, but I did find that all of a sudden I could start to make out some of the numbers in the Ishihara tests. And yeah, in general, I just had this feeling that as my overall vision was improving and my myopia and astigmatism were decreasing and the distance was coming into more and more focus, it's kind of like as my cones were sort of recalibrating to the details I was getting, they were also sensitizing more to the color perception too. It was almost like a little side effect of vision improvement is the color vision kind of beefed up a little bit too.
I love what you said about like sometimes, I was farsighted. I had a convergent squint. I could never do the diverging. I don't have the books here to show, but those magic eye books that have all the squiggly lines and people see these 3D images and I could never do them. And before I understood why I didn't see them, I was just like, oh, I don't need to even try. I'm not going to see this. So I think what's really important, what you just said, is that we actually expose ourselves because I practice this now, and I can still, like you said, with the colors, there's a spectrum. I know some of these divergent, like magic eye books are easier for me because I can see it quickly, and others I have to take a long time, and I can still see, oh, those are more challenges. Or see some 3D, but I can't really make out the shape or something. So just like you said, you exposed your eyes, especially with colors. The retina receives all these beautiful, like especially with syntonics, which is really a specific form of color vision therapy delivered by usually syntonic trained optometrists or practitioners. And we know we had a guest on here before who talked about how
Mm.
trauma, like purple, like there's certain color frequencies that are really important to, where your imbalances are, where you need help with. And it doesn't matter if you see the colors like a person with normal color vision does, they still benefit your system. And I love how you talked about, something you and I teach is like color of the day, looking for colors, how you basically hone your skill by exposing yourself to colors, but also practicing this with a mindset of like, when I do these practices or focus on my cone cells, which are the color perception cells, right? Our rod cells that are peripheral vision and night vision, they will never able to see color for nobody, So working on these things, I think that's a very important message because a lot of times I see that, in my work, and I'm sure you see the same, and maybe you can talk about a little bit more that people kind of push away the things they're not good at, so to speak. It's like, oh, I don't, I can't do this. You want to talk about that a little bit more, like because mindset, I feel like is such a big piece of vision improvement.
Yeah. Well, you also just brought up a really good point about the rods and the peripheral vision is that anatomically speaking, they never will receive the light vibration and interpret it into color perception because that's not how they function. They're like the motion sensors, so they're really good at tracking our environment and our space and the movement happening there. But it's not like we have grayscale in our peripheral field. Like I'm looking at the camera right now, but in my periphery, I can sense the green leaves of the plant off in my periphery. And, the moving colored purple lights in my background on the screen, even though I don't have the cones in that part of my retina to see those colors with. So how's that possible? It's the brain filling in the color in the more grayscale periphery. Right. So, and that lines right up with Bates's whole claim about vision being 90% mental, 10% physical. If our vision was purely just a physical, light reception, then it would just be color concentrated in the middle and the rest would be pretty black and white. But it's not that way at all. The brain is able to take the color that's coming into the cones and essentially kind of mentally spread it out. And since I looked at the green leaf with my cones a moment ago and now they're off in there, it's like the memory of the color retains. So that's the other thing to kind of back up the possibility that that we can improve our color vision is that it's not, it's like, well, I'm missing a red cone receptor in my retina. How is this possible? The brain has a lot of power to fill in missing parts of the visual field. So that's essentially kind of one way to answer your question, because really, if we are looking at it very physically, we might not even bother, or we might not feel motivated to even look into developing color vision or natural vision in general. But the more we
Can
just
I say
understand, like,
something?
oh, this could be possible.
Yeah, I want to add something to what you just said. So obviously we don't have color perceptions on the outer periphery. So if the car is moving on the side, we see movement first. But if we know there was a red car next to us, like we have that memory. But the same thing, which I wasn't aware of until a few years ago, when I talked to one of our colleagues from Germany about glaucoma, because you always see these visual simulations, and like we see these apps or these way to simulate a vision problem, which is like kind of a rude way of trying to, like, not rude, but crude way of
Yeah.
demonstrating. And I see in glaucoma, we always thought this black tunnel, but she said, no, no, no. The brain kind of, like what you just said with colors, the brain kind of fills in things from what you see in this field. And it kind of like, I used to work in Photoshop. So it's called Photoshop Content Aware. I would just fill in the space with the other stuff. And
Mhm.
I think understanding that our brain will like it creates this basically to a certain point, like this memory based on what the information it has. So you don't have this black tunnel. And same with the vision. It's not like it's just like this all of a sudden it's a black and white movie on the side and the front, but it's a color movie. It's kind of a slow, process. So I think that's really important. But let's talk about more specific things. So you mentioned some things for those of the people watching that have never heard of the Bates method. Can you describe a couple of things that people can do, like what you did and help your students with, to hone in and improve their color perception?
Totally. I think my favorite way to align this with the original Bates method, which is like my main thing I teach and love doing deep dives on, is actually traced all the way back to the foreword of Dr. Bates's original book, Perfect Sight Without Glasses, from 1920. Before the whole book even starts, there's a one-page foreword called The Fundamental Principle, where he's introducing central fixation, claiming that that central fixation is the fundamental principle of the whole Bates method, which has to do with us all noticing the difference between our central vision and our peripheral vision. And this is even where color comes up for the first time in the book, because and you and I talked about this a little bit more in our last one, so maybe people could watch the replay of the last
Yeah,
episode
we
about
will we
color,
will link that underneath for sure. Yes.
because we spent some time looking at this fundamental principle thing in terms of imagining and remembering colors. So far we've been talking about the colors that we're perceiving out there, but Bates actually had people close their eyes, think of a color mentally, and visualize it, and then flash open on that page onto one word on the page for two reasons. It was thinking of the color had this effect of relaxation. So it gave the mind something to focus on. That person all of a sudden was no longer worrying about the past or the future. It's a way to be very sort of present. And just like I'm thinking about the color blue right now. It's just taking up my whole, visual field, my whole mind. Or maybe I'm thinking about a blue object. I just bought some blueberries yesterday at the store at the co-op. So maybe I'm picturing a blueberry, but you just relax. And then when you open up, you might have more of an experience of central fixation, which is seeing best where you're looking, as opposed to trying to see everything all equally clearly at once. And if you're looking at a page in a book, great way to test that out, because if you're not in central fixation mode, then you might be making some sort of conscious or subconscious attempt to try and see the whole page, all the words equally the same level of clarity, as opposed to central fixation would be seeing the word you're actually looking at better than all the rest of the words, which are all technically peripheral.
Yeah,
But
so
the page
central
in the book is
fixation.
black and white.
So what I love, so center fixation is that word always kind of threw me off because I thought it sounded like fixating like a nail and not moving. But the
Mhm.
idea is, I think, very important for that was one of the biggest things for me when I first learned vision improvement. I think for many people, that idea that our anatomy sees as such a tiny point perfectly clear anywhere else. And it's the same with the mind. We kind of glorify multitasking and doing all these things at the same time when in reality, and that's what the Bates method is really about, it's really 90% mind. Because if the mind is trying to spread to like all these different things, right? That there's no way your visual focus and your mental focus are so connected. So when you talk about the color blue, like for instance, can you go into a little bit more detail? So when you said about the color blue, like I just want to hone in very clearly on the idea of straining. And by the way, here's the book, I have a
Nice.
version here
Yeah.
that is the original, and that's like the little fundamental principle page. But yeah, talk a little bit about that. How is it different? When you think about the color blue, and let's say maybe you get somebody asked you to think of a color that you don't like, so talk a little bit about that and how is thinking of blue, not straining, trying to see all the blue in the world at the same time, how is that working compared to like trying to see all the letters clear at once when in fact you can just see a tiny dot? Can you know what I mean? Explain that mental component a little bit using the example of a color.
Yeah. Well, it's like when the eyes are closed, or even better yet, when we're palming and there's literally no light coming into the eye, then we're really eliminating the eyesight component. We're not talking about color perception. We're not talking about light entering the eye, hitting the cones, this chemical process of the transduction of the light into the optic nerves. It's just all dark. And so then what are we talking about? We're talking about this other quality of color, which is not connected to the light entry, but it's more the memory of it. And the whole chapter in that book you held up memory as an aid to vision, and then the other one, imagination as an aid to vision. I always looked at the ability to remember or imagine colors as a very kind of basic way to improve my memory and my imagination because it was formless. If I'm just closing my eyes or palming and I'm imagining any color that I want, taking up my entire field, it's not necessarily talking about my visual field. It's almost like I'm just surrounded by it, 360 degrees. I'm like bathing in it, it's just taking up everything. So it's not necessarily me trying to focus on it all, clearly, because that's the beauty of colors is whether a color is in focus or out of focus, you're still seeing it or imagining it because we've taken that form element out of it.
So
So that's just one way to do it. Like I said about the blueberry, that could be a more sort of central fixation way of doing it. Maybe I'm palming and I'm imagining a bunch of blueberries spread out, but I'm practicing shifting from this blueberry to that
right.
blueberry. And and that is the other kind of practical thing I wanted to bring in today was doing the central fixation practice on different colors that are far apart from each other, and then closer to each other, and then closer to each other, and eventually right next to each other to start actually experiencing the difference in our color perception, whether it's central or peripheral. So maybe if people want to try this themselves, they can either identify two different colored objects nearby, or maybe you can set it up for yourself. But like I've got some prayer flags over here that are blue, white, red, green, yellow, blue, white, red, green, yellow. And so I'm gonna just look at the blue one on the far left, and that means the one on the very far right is yellow. So when I look at the blue one, I'm noticing the like you said, the saturation of the blue, the vibrance of the color, the vividness of that color compared to the dullness of the yellow. Versus when I then shift over to the yellow one, all of a sudden the yellow one pops and it's more vivid and rich and saturated. The blue one off to the left is paler now compared to when I look right at it. So I'm inviting people to do this themselves, and you can even do it on a screen, but I think it's better with actual objects of can you prove to yourself that colors truly do look a little less vibrant when they're not central. And essentially the farther you go from the center, the greater the loss of saturation. It gets a little tricky when we're talking about colors that are like right next to each other because the cones are still able to kind of perceive it better because it's closer to the central vision. But this is one of the main ways that I felt like I was training my color perception of my vision was doing this shifting back and forth. But almost more importantly is it actually helped me then learn central fixation when it comes to the details, right? Because this is like the easy version of like, oh yeah, that's less colorful and now it's more colorful. Then the next level would be like, okay, well, when I'm looking at a chart, can I tell that, you know, this line is worse than this line because I'm looking at this one's peripheral, and now this line's better than this one because I'm looking here and this one's peripheral. That was much harder for me because of the myopia and the astigmatism. The color version was like really easy to get started with.
So it's a great way to practice this concept of central focus where you see like, we both teach this kind of like have two thumbs, you look at that one, you see that better than the other one. And people that have stared for a long time, they might get to a point where they say, oh, I see them equally well. I had a student once who looked at the big Snellen chart and she said when she looked at the E, she can read the like basically all the letters look the same. So then we have to kind of break it down. And I like that idea of using colors, especially if you have refractive error and things are blurry. So you use colors as a way. I'm seeing this color more vibrant or less vibrant. So even if you have some kind of color blindness, you can just see that you perceive that color more bright or more vibrant or and so you could even technically use the same color, right? You could have two blue flags, whatever.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
the one that
Mhm.
you're looking at is like, especially if you have color changes, I would think I absolutely love this. I never really used colors in terms of teaching center fixation, but I think it's a really great way. And for your near vision, maybe use an easy Ishihara one that is relatively bright and contrasty, and just look at the colorful dots,
Mhm.
and kind of, but start easy. I think that's something that a lot of, I don't know about you students, there's always like the far side people want to read small print and candlelight, and the near side people want to see the street
Yeah.
signs like 3 blocks over. But I'm like, well, start with something that's closer to your ideal, like do something easy, and then when you can do that, then you can do the next level, right? Versus trying to like I don't know, I always say in yoga you're not going to start with handstand, you have to master mountain pose, Udita Hastasana, you have
Mhm.
to be able to master that
Mhm.
and have straight arms, and then you can at some point start with handstands. So that's, so you talked about
Yeah.
practicing central fixation, you practice with colors, the imagination, memory imagination, but you also mentioned sunning earlier. Do you want to, or
Yeah.
any other things that you could give us before we wrap up? Like, what are some other things that people can do, especially if they have some color challenges?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like my favorite topic in the whole field is the sunning and the sunlight and the natural light therapy. But just to maybe give a very tangible example of what you just said about the easy to the more difficult is like kind of what we just did. If I've got these different colored pencils, for example, I've got a yellow one and a purple one, different colors, you know, the people who would want to be like, oh, I really want to just get this right away, they would be holding them really close and maybe not seeing that much of a difference. But to make it really easy, you just hold them really far apart from each other and like really have to actually turn your head so that the other color is so far to the edge that you can barely even see it at all, and then swing over to the other one, and compared to when it was on the very far edge, it pops, when you look right at it, and then it goes off into that more sort of almost grayscale type. But remember, your brain can still project the color onto it even when it is far on the periphery, but we're looking for that subtle change, that subtle difference. And if you can notice it in sort of the easy mode with them far apart,
I
then
have
we
like
would
the
bring,
same color here.
yeah, and then bringing them closer together,
Right.
and now it doesn't seem to fade as much. The yellow one stays a little more yellow when I'm on the purple one, the purple one stays a little more purple when I'm on the yellow one. And then even more so if they're touching each other, but I'm still looking for that same thing. When I centralize on the yellow one, can I see the yellow more yellow? And then I go to the purple one and I allow the yellow one to lose a little bit of yellow. It's still very yellow, but it's a really interesting way to really activate the cone cells. And it's the fovea centralis that needs to be like reawoken to get the central fixation. And with the constant shifting, it's not about just staring at the yellow one and trying to make it happen. You just keep alternating and switching and shifting. Because just to reiterate what you clarified earlier, Claudia, it's like not about fixating on one point. It's about shifting your fixation to all kinds of different points. There's a lot of things to look at and explore.
So I love what you just said. So, and I thought I had a green and a pink one, but I guess I only used the yellow one, so I put the other ones away. But having like
Hmm.
bright colored pencils or, I have
Yeah.
some like post-it stickers. So, you can
Nice.
use
Yeah.
everyday objects. And I like, so you start far away, you notice that that one looks brighter, or you don't even see the other color really when you, depending on,
Yeah.
and then you work your way to like making it closer and closer. So that's a great tip, combining the central focus because that's where we have the best color perception, but also the focus instead of trying to work with letters or eye charts, which might be initially way too challenging and hard and frustrating. So let's wrap this up. Like, what kind of sunlight? I know sunlight or natural light is so. That's why I wear white today. It's all the colors combined make white.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about what people can do, or what is your kind of recommended practice when it comes to natural light in order to help with color perception.
Yeah, I think it's honestly important for everybody, whether you have color deficiency or not, is to decrease light sensitivity and adapt the eye organs to handle sunlight without sunglasses. And so the simplest way of doing that is with, I always have people do the sun sandwiches, the alternating, the sunning and palming, either both eyes at the same time and going back and forth, or just doing one at a time and switching every 5 or 10 seconds. And eyes are closed the whole time. We're just letting the sun land on the closed eyelids. And once again, we're nourishing the retinas. We're feeding the cones with that full spectrum natural sunlight and we're getting a lot of pupillary adjustment along the way when we're adapting from the dark to the bright. The iris muscles are constricting and relaxing, which is very important. And that's kind of the basic version. But in terms of the one that's maybe a little more specific to activating color perception, is the sun strobing, where we can either just do it with our hands if we spread the fingers out and wave them in front of the closed eyelids to create more of that flickering light effect, or it's even more effective to use a tool like a sun shifter that has slots cut out of it, and you would move that in front of the closed eyes, and it's a more sort of uniform experience. And yeah, it just after obviously you don't want to do this if you're sensitive to flickering lights or epileptic or things like that. But what I notice when I do that one is like the whole rainbow appears. Like when I do the basic sun sandwiches, it's like I'm perceiving the light that's coming through my eyelids. So it's sort of like yellow, red, orange kind of hue. But when I do the flickering light, I get blues and purples and greens, and it's such a beautiful light show, especially if you take palming breaks and you let it all kind of fade out and go back to black and then back to the flickering light. Sometimes it takes a little bit of repetition to kind of relax into the experience because it can be very enlivening and invigorating, all this like blinking, flickering light. So I had to kind of settle down into it and become very relaxed with it to then start to perceive what colors I was experiencing. And sometimes they form even like patterns, and it's just really interesting to watch. But I really do think that stimulated my retinas and my cone cells in particular in kind of a unique way compared to the more gradual, gentle adjustment from light to dark with the sun sandwiches. The rapid flickering light
I
seemed
love
to
the
just like hook
alternating.
it
I've
on.
never done it. I've only done sunning and then palming and then do the sandwiches, but I've never, like, I've done one eye-sided palming, but I think that's a really great idea to do it out in the sun is coming because you even have a more rapid pupillary action. But I think the strobing, and one of my team makes these shifters also out of wood and plastic. And like you said, these are really great. I absolutely love them because you do see all the colors of the rainbow. I remember when I first learned this at the very beginning. I always thought it was supposed to be black when I'm palming, and I saw all these beautiful red and blues and all these colors in a visual field with my eyes closed. Initially, I was like, go away, go away. And then I really recognized how beautiful they are and really
Mhm.
letting them, enjoying them before they slowly fade away. So that's like an
Cool.
after image, kind of a reaction to the
Yeah.
stimulation of the cell. So also when people ask about the closed eyelids, if you've ever done this and then took them away, you realize how much light comes to the closed eyelids. I also do open eye sunning with the shifter and stuff, but that's more the advanced level, where we need to make sure that your eyes are healthy enough to do that. But the closed
Yeah.
eye one is right, is safe really for everybody to do. And it's such a great tool to improve that. I love how you said it stimulates the color perception and seeing all these beautiful rainbow colors. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it's like the language that helped me a lot is like what is going to wake up my retinas, what's going to wake up my cone cells if they're sort of dormant or they're understimulated or underutilized. And the sun is the thing that wakes us up. I mean, it's what the eyes need, that light to really see. And so that's what I was teaching in Italy last month. The little variation I came up with was the one-eyed strobing. So you're palming one eye and just doing the strobing on the other eye. And then you've got this really interesting mix of like black on one side and then all these colors on the other side, and then switching
Oh, that's so
compared
cool.
to
I love that.
doing both
Yeah.
at the same time.
And it shows something too, Nathan, that I am, how when we teach vision improvement, that's something that's so dear to my heart. It's like understanding the principles of this, but then being creative and coming up with new ways of doing things. We all learn from each other. So I absolutely love that idea of doing one-sided palming and kind of combining things in a way where one eye gets stimulated and the other eye rests. And so you kind of see the contrast. So thank you so much for being here. What do you want to say to conclude this? Also, we posted all your website. Like, tell people where they can find you, how they can work with you.
Yeah, yeah, this has been a lot of fun and yeah, perfect timing with me just fresh off this trip from Italy at this color event. So really glad we could connect today and make this happen. And I'm excited to have you on the Better Eyesight podcast next month for July. So I would encourage people to look out for that. A new episode comes out on the first day of each month, where we do kind of a deep dive on the Bates magazines, the Better Eyesight magazines. So that's sort of an ongoing project, but if people are interested in getting more involved, I am actually hosting a vision retreat here where I live in Vermont this summer. So that's going to be, I think, August 16th, 17th, and 18th. So it's a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday retreat. Here I live at a ski resort mountain in northern Vermont. So in the summertime, it's super green, and we're going to do some nice hiking and some cool night walks, which really also is another way to activate the rods more so than the cones, like you brought up the night vision earlier. So that's going to be added to my website. People can check that out. And then I'm also doing an online, like an 8-week class series that's being put on by this organization in Maine, but it's virtual, so you can tune into it from anywhere. And I haven't linked that on my website, but I'll be adding that this week. So yeah, that's an 8-week online vision improvement class series. It's 90-minute classes every Wednesday from July 9th to August 27th.
Wonderful. I attended one of your retreats, like your early ones in Bowen Island,
Yeah.
Vancouver, near Vancouver, which was amazing. So I wish I could come to that one. It's just a little far for me to fly all the way. But yeah, your
Yep,
retreats are
Vermont, it's
amazing.
kind of off the beaten path, but I mean, I'm biased, but I think it's one of the most beautiful states in the country, so
But
worth a
I think an
visit.
in-person retreat is such a great way to, no matter if you're a beginner or you've already done it for a while, to kind of really dive deep under the guidance of somebody like Nathan, who really knows what they're doing and can give you the right strategies and tips for your needs. So thank you so much. I know you're also on Instagram and YouTube, and obviously everything is on integraleyesight.com is your website. so people can
Yes.
find links to your online retreat, to your in-person retreat, to all your classes and events that you're doing. So thank you so much. And then I posted the link for the Better Eyesight podcast, which is an amazing collaboration that Esther, our beloved, recently deceased colleague, and you created, which is basically just so close this off because I'm so honored to be on the show again. We're reading the exactly 100 year old later, which was a printed magazine that came out in the early 19th centuries, and we're reading them 100 years later, and then we have a discussion with the teachers that are, so July is going to be Nathan and myself. We talking about like how our experience with students and clients and what the modern world, right? The 100 years later. But it's amazing how true all these amazing stories are that we're going to discuss. And so that's a great free podcast that Nathan is putting a lot of time and effort into producing. So thank you for doing that for the whole community. Thank you, thank you. And any last words, any last message you want to share?
I'm just really happy that people are curious about this topic because, kind of like you hinted at the beginning, sometimes it's not only left out of the conversation in the conventional eye care world, it's not really checked or tested as much as our visual acuity, but it's even sometimes left out of the holistic vision world too. It's, everybody just wants to improve their eyesight, get rid of their glasses, but I get really excited when I hear my students sharing like, oh, colors seem different now. And I even had one student who started dreaming in color. Like their whole life, they were dreaming in black and white,
Oh,
I guess. And then
wow.
all of a sudden, the color made its way into their dreams, which like that blew me away. It just, so like I said earlier, it's to me, I look at the color as this kind of gauge of how like beautiful this world is that we live in, and the more color we can take in and perceive, it can really help boost our mood and our experience here on the planet. So yeah, it's a really fascinating topic, and what makes me most impressed about it is that we still don't even really know what light is. Like, is it a wave? Is it a photon? These colors are just very mysterious, and I really like studying them and kind of seeing what their impact can be on not only our eyes and our vision, because that's where the color primarily comes in, but really in our whole body, our whole wellness, and our whole life. So yeah,
I have
hopefully
so
this
many
could
more
sort of
questions now. I feel like we could do another. Like I was just thinking about magic mushrooms, psilocybin, because the ones that create all the different colors. Like, what about people that are colorblind? Because
Mm,
we talked about how colors are perceived in the brain versus the
mhm.
differences of the colors that you are, but the light only comes in through the eyes. Like that's the only organ in our whole body where the skin doesn't know light. It all comes in through the eyes. So then I'm wondering, do people like that not experience the same like so many things to discuss? I think we have to bring you back and talk about colors one more time. It's such an amazing topic, like you said, and there's so many branches of it. Reflected light versus light in the sunlight that we don't see because it looks white to us, but all the colors are obviously in the sunlight spectrum. There was one question on YouTube before we come to a close that I do want you to answer. What time of the day do you do the sunning? What is your hot last minute tip here?
No, that's a great question because it is important to ideally, stack it in the morning or the evening. So lower in the sky when the sun is low in the sky, the lower solar angle. So I'm doing my sunning practices usually sometime between sunrise and like 9 or 10 a.m. And then if I do it again, I'll usually wait until like after 4 p.m. towards sunset. I will do it sometimes in between there, between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. when it's more like directly above. I'll just decrease the duration or the length of it. So in the morning or the evening, maybe I'll go for 3 or 4 minutes at a time. But in those midday breaks, I'll just do maybe 30 seconds or 1 minute. And then, because it's just higher UV index, more
Right.
powerful. So, and, I live in northern Vermont, so it's, I'm pretty far up there. And so if you're living on the equator, that might be a different answer. But ultimately, just lower in the sky is better and less is more. It's not the kind of thing where it's like, oh, I'm going to overdo this. It's like, think about feeding your eyes 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, just these little snacks of light, as opposed to like an all-you-can-eat buffet of overdoing it, overindulging.
I love the little, we hear a lot about movement snacks, the little do like 10 air squats or something, or go for a little walk. Or I love that idea of like, vision candy, like the good, like, but the idea of vision or eye snacks, or the idea of taking little breaks for your eyes. So thank you so much, Nathan. This was amazing. Now we have a little bit of extra time with my Clear Vision Club peeps here on Zoom. So thank you,
Awesome.
YouTube. Goodbye, YouTube. And next week we have another expert talk about color vision. So genau,
Perfect.
peace.